Nintendo really needs to stop taking a decade to release a new major entries for this series, because Pikmin 4 is easily one of the Switch's best exclusives. Like, for very different reasons, it's right up there with Tears of the Kingdom for me. To some of you that haven't played the game, that might sound silly. I mean, we are talking about a game that involves you using cute little plant creatures to collect things while riding on an adorable two-legged space pupper. But speaking as a major fan of both series and games, Pikmin 4 really is just that good, and if you ask me, it has just as much love, thought, and effort put into it that Tears of the Kingdom does. It takes aspects from every entry in the series and improves on them while also doing its own thing to create not only my personal favorite experience I've had with this series, but also the most newcomer-friendly one for those that haven't played a Pikmin game before. After the series' most prominent character Olimar once again crash lands on the world of PNF 404, he, with the help of the Pikmin and an adorable green dog named Moss, send a distress call for help, which the Rescue Corps receives. Unfortunately, though, the Rescue Corps, for unknown reasons, end up shipwrecking on the planet themselves, and they have to repair their ship, the SS Beagle, while trying to find and rescue Olimar, as well as plenty of others. See, as it turns out, Olimar's distress call was picked up by far more people than just the Rescue Corps, and all of them have also crashed, because at this point, PNF 404 is basically the Bermuda Triangle, but as an entire planet. Instead of playing as one of the other characters, though, for the first time in the series, you get to create your own character to play as, and while I think it's kind of a neat feature, I'm not too hot on it. The customization's unfortunately pretty limited, but more importantly, it doesn't really add anything to the game for me. The player character is only important to the story in that they're the ones doing the heavy lifting. They have no real character to speak of. They exist purely for the gameplay. I'm fine with the idea of a player character, but if you're gonna do it, I'd like for them to not feel like they're only here for the gameplay itself, and story-wise they're arguably irrelevant and could be replaced by another member of the cast. On the note of the cast, though, they more than make up for my issues with the player character. They're all really charming, and they make for a fun group of people to interact with. I especially loved having a home base to interact with both them and all the rescued castaways in. It was a great way to start each new day, and they all had plenty of personality. Honestly though, this entire game is really charming. The environments are even more gorgeous than Pikmin 3's, and I love how they dialed up the more, let's say, human elements to each area. The treasures make a reappearance, and those are just as great to have here as they were in Pikmin 2, but I loved how almost each area in the game was like one small part of somebody's house, with you actually being able to go inside their house at one point. Beyond all of that, the greatest source of charm for me, though, easily comes from the good boy himself, Ochi. We'll get more into him as a gameplay mechanic later, but for right now, I hope you'll forgive me for letting out my inner cringy dog lover for a moment, because Ochi is the best. I mean, just look at him, he's a big ol' round bouncing puppy that's your steed, an upgradable Pikmin, and a second captain who, despite not having hands, can throw Pikmin anyway. I absolutely love this adorable little guy, and I'm so genuinely angry I can't pet him. In the decade Nintendo spent making this game, the devs seem to have had plenty of time for brainstorming, because there's a lot of new ideas and even interesting changes in Pikmin 4. For starters, while a lot of the basic mechanics are the same here as before, with you genociding the local wildlife to grow more little plant buddies, this time around you can't have 100 Pikmin in the field at the start. Instead, you can only use 20, and you need to find and bring back a new kind of collectible called a Flarlick, which expands the onion's ability to pull out Pikmin by 10 for each one brought back. In regards to the Pikmin themselves, though, you can only have a max of 3 Pikmin types out at once, which is honestly a change I welcome since it helps make sure every Pikmin type is useful. On a related note, getting new Pikmin types isn't quite as simple as finding the onion and getting to work on growing new guys this time around. With the exception of reds, you will typically find new types of Pikmin in caves first. In order to grow them normally, you'll have to find their onion at a later point, and with the exception of the yellow and blue onions, you'll be waiting a long while on getting the onions for the other 6 types. Speaking of those other types though, along with the Pikmin from the first 3 games, we now have 2 new ones with the Ice and Glow Pikmin. Ice Pikmin have 2 unique properties. They can freeze bodies of water, provided you have enough of them on you, and they can freeze enemies solid. Now, the water freezing thing, while pretty cool, didn't come up much due to how insanely high the requirements can be for certain bodies of water, but their ability to freeze enemies is actually overpowered. As ice Pikmin attack, they'll fill up a freeze gauge on an enemy, and the more ice Pikmin you have on them, the faster it fills, and when done so, your Pikmin will be able to beat down on an enemy with no risk of death for a few seconds. At lower numbers, this isn't that strong, but once you have a squad of 50 or so Pikmin, you will easily annihilate most enemies. Now, the trade-off for this is that when an enemy is killed while frozen, they don't leave behind a body, so if you want something to bring back, you will have to be careful about your ice Pikmin. The glow Pikmin, though, work very differently. They can only be found during the new night exploration sections, which we'll get more into later, and these little guys are immune to every kind of hazard, and instead of having a normal swarm command like the other types, you can charge up a glow mob with them to stun enemies. Now, while it's not possible to bring these guys with you during the day, after each night exploration, you do get special glow seeds based on how many Pikmin were grown during the night. These can be used to spawn glow Pikmin during other night expeditions, and even when you're in a cave if you need the extra help. Along with the new types of Pikmin though, there's also a new kind of resource you'll want to keep an eye on with the raw materials. Crystal objects that you'll use to build structures in the environment like bridges and even for making upgrades and items. When you're back at base camp, you can use your raw materials at the lab to make upgrades in the form of gear for you and Ochi. These are things like protection against certain hazards, things that increase your health as well as defense, and so on and so forth. If you need some extra firepower though, you can also use them to create extra bombs and even healing items to use when you need them, which from my experience was partly in the caves and predominantly during the new night sections. See, throughout the entire series it's been warned pretty heavily about how dangerous night on PNF 404 is with the nocturnal predators, and for the first time in the series you actually get to see this for yourself. See, some of the castaways have been converted into leaflings, a strange Pikmin hybrid obsessed with the art of Dandori, and in order to cure them, you need to collect glow sap from the glow Pikmin's luminols. To do this, you with the glow Pikmin will have to defend them from the hordes of feral creatures until you either defeat all of them or survive until daybreak. And this is where those items come into play, because the later sections get kind of rough. Early ones aren't really hard, but once you have stronger enemies and even bosses start showing up, your glows by themselves may not be enough, because it's unlikely you'll be able to sprout anywhere close to 100 of these things. Along with your plethora of explosives helping you during these sections, and really the entire game, you also have the most useful tool and friend in your arsenal, Ochi. As I mentioned earlier, he's a ride for both you and your Pikmin, he works kind of like a Pikmin himself, and even doubles as a captain, who you can upgrade by using his pup drive. It doesn't stop there though, because Ochi also has his Rush, which is a charge that can both knock treasures off of ledges and launch all of your Pikmin onto an enemy, and after some upgrades, can even stun them. I reiterate, why can't I pet him? This does bring me to one of the biggest criticisms I've seen levied against the game though, its difficulty. I've seen plenty of people say that most of the time the game is too easy, and for series veterans, I can't disagree with this. Pikmin 4 most likely will be too easy for you. Despite that though, I personally think the game's level of challenge is perfect. Pikmin 4 is meant to be a great entry point for newcomers, and with those people in mind, I don't feel the game is too hard or too easy. I will say, however, that while I personally think this will make for a better overall experience for newcomers, I do think it would have been nice if the game had its own version of Pikmin 3 Deluxe's Ultra Spicy mode for those that want a challenge. This does kinda bring us to my favorite overall improvement Pikmin 4 brings to the table with how it handles the caves, because compared to the second game, these are way better. Functionally, they play the same as they did in 2. You'll explore each cave's sub-levels for treasures to get Sparklium, find castaways to rescue, and maybe fight a cool boss at the end. Comparatively though, they don't take as long, and they rarely have as many floors. They're overall a much smoother experience, and visually, they're not quite as repetitive as what they were in Pikmin 2. Most caves had their own identity to them, and they blended Pikmin's puzzle aspects with the combat aspects much better to make for a far more enjoyable experience for me, with the final cave easily being my favorite one. Heck, if I'm being honest here, I was worried about potentially having to deal with this game's own version of Pikmin 2's Submerged Castle, and subsequently my Sleep Paralysis Demon, but the Engulfed Castle and its Water Wraith are nowhere near as bad, and was actually a pretty fun experience for me. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that dealing with it's kind of a joke this time around, but honestly, given how much anxiety and stress the Water Wraith and the original Submerged Castle caused me, I completely welcome this change. Now, gameplay-wise, there is one more thing I haven't gone over yet. You remember those leaflings I mentioned earlier? Well, actually getting them isn't always as simple as just bringing them back to base camp. You see, most of the time, in order to bring back a leafling, you'll have to do a Dandori challenge or battle. Dandori is the art of accomplishing tasks effectively and efficiently, and as leaflings are half Pikmin, they're of course obsessed with the stuff. Dandori challenges are similar to Pikmin 3's mission mode. Here you'll use a set amount of Pikmin to bring back treasures and enemy corpses within a time limit, and just like Pikmin 3's mission mode, I absolutely loved them. They don't start out too bad, but some of the later ones can get pretty challenging, especially some of the later Dandori battles, which is kinda like the challenges but with you competing against another character. And actually, these do bring me to my only other criticism of Pikmin 4 with its auto-lock-on. This makes your targeting reticle automatically lock onto a target you can throw a Pikmin to, and while it's kind of handy I suppose, it's annoyingly sensitive. If you have multiple lock-onable targets sitting very close to each other, but you're wanting to target one of them specifically, chances are you're going to have to fight the game a little bit to actually target what you're wanting. Normally it's not so bad, it's an actual hindrance, but in the challenges where efficiency is key, not always having full control over where my Pikmin are going is kind of annoying. And you know what, the same goes for the weird pause for how many Pikmin you can have on an object before you can put more on them. I get why it's here, but it's kinda frustrating when I'm wanting to max out how fast my little dudes are bringing things back. There really needed to be a way to adjust these things or straight up turn them off. I don't know how right this is for me to directly ask as a reviewer, but if at any point during this video you found yourself interested in Pikmin 4, I absolutely encourage you to consider picking it up for yourself. It's very fun and satisfying to play, and like I said at the start, it's perfect for newcomers. It's easier difficulty, and even additions I didn't mention, like the ability to rewind time if you made a mistake, gives the player plenty of leeway. And on top of all that, it's just a really great and charming game that I think we can all agree, after 10 years worth of development, deserves the love and attention. Honestly, I also just want the game to sell really well, so I don't have to wait until my early 30s to play Pikmin 5. Like, seriously, Nintendo, I love you guys and appreciate the hard work and passion you put into these games, but you really have to stop taking a decade to release a new Pikmin game. 5 to 6 years would be one thing, but 9 or 10 consistently is a bit much for really any game. Thank you all for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have a nice day.